This is another one, and this is this next one, the Green New Deal. How many of you guys ever heard of the Green New Deal? How many of you guys know who AOC is, or Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez? Okay, it's really her whole thing. Okay, Senator Ed Markey from Massachusetts also joined her in kind of rolling this thing out, and I figured, I was thinking, I mean, I know a lot about this, but I thought that I'd give you two opposing views on it. So I got on YouTube this morning, pulled up a couple different videos. The first one I'm going to show you is pro Green New Deal, and the second one is in opposition. Okay, and so we're going to do that. I'm going to show that, and then we're going to talk about taxes. I'm supposed to leave that open. Let's get this rolling. That one. This one. Okay. There we go. This one. Go this way. Okay, 6 minutes. Okay. This is probably faster than I can do this. New deal.
New legislation known as the Green New Deal. Your callers are talking about a super expensive new Green Deal. There is some debate over how strongly the party should embrace this Green New Deal. This Green New Deal ahead from here.
The Green New Deal. For those on the left, it's our only chance to both rebalance the economy and save the planet.
Climate change and our environmental challenges are one of the biggest existential threats to our way of life, not just as a nation, but as a world. And in order for us to combat that threat, we must be as ambitious and innovative in our solution as possible.
For those on the right, it's a crazy socialist pipe dream that will rob Americans of everything from flights to cars.
What they are proposing is so outrageously expensive and cost prohibitive, even they acknowledge that if we confiscated all the billionaires' wealth, they still wouldn't be able to pay for this mess of theirs.
But what exactly is the Green New Deal proposing? And how realistic is it? The Green New Deal takes its name from President Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal, a series of economic and social programs enacted in the 1930s that pulled the U.S. out of the Great Depression. In a similar fashion, the Green New Deal proposes a number of ideas to reshape the U.S. economy. With a 14-page resolution unveiled by Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Senator Ed Markey, focusing on clean energy, jobs, and infrastructure in order to tackle climate change. These include making the United States 100% powered by renewable energy, such as hydroelectric, wind, biomass, solar, and geothermal. Currently, renewables only account for 20% of U.S. energy production, lagging behind natural gas and coal. But eliminating carbon emissions within 10 years is likely to prove extremely difficult without both massive government spending and some sort of major technology advance. The deal also looks beyond climate change, proposing high-quality healthcare, affordable housing, and economic security for all U.S. citizens. This would come about through trillions of dollars worth of large-scale public investments and a federal jobs guarantee. That is, anyone who wanted a job paying at least $15 an hour with good benefits would be entitled to one. All the while, proponents of the Green New Deal want to make sure that the most vulnerable in society, whether it be low-income communities, indigenous communities, or communities of color, are not adversely hit by these radical economic changes. Talk of the Green New Deal has captured the imagination of many Americans, and it's attracted high-profile political support as well, with a number of Democratic contenders for 2020, such as Kamala Harris, Kirsten Gillibrand, Amy Klobuchar, and Cory Booker. The fact that such a radical idea is being endorsed by mainstream Democratic figures shows just how much efforts to tackle climate change have entered mainstream political thought, and a lot of that is because of voters. Recent polling shows 6 in 10 Americans are either alarmed or concerned about climate change. And there's a real economic incentive as well, with climate change set to do trillions of dollars of damage to infrastructure. For example, every year wildfires will likely burn twice as much forested area by 2050 as they do today. But despite
like cheeseburgers and milkshake will become a thing of the past. But finally, the Green New Deal is ambitious. To frame it more accurately, it's an unworkable pie-in-the-sky attempt to reshape every aspect of everyday American life.
What is this Green New Deal? Answer: radical environmental socialism.
Even the president has attacked the idea.
But perhaps nothing is more extreme than the Democrats' plan to completely take over American energy and completely destroy America's economy through their new $100 trillion Green New Deal.
And it's no surprise. Using government to intervene in the economy and fight climate change is a political cocktail of everything the GOP is against. And the fact that it's such a broad idea at the moment means Republicans can present a whole host of nightmare scenarios if it is enacted. Resistance to the Green New Deal mainly boils down to one fundamental question. How are we going to pay for it? Taxes seem the most likely, whether it be a carbon tax, a financial transactions tax, or raising income tax rates up to 70% on the ultra-wealthy. Democrats could also point out the hypocrisy of Republicans when it comes to spending vast amounts of money, be it for the military, tax cuts for the wealthy, or a border wall. Winning over the public is the other problem. Despite the majority of Americans wanting to tackle climate change and create green new jobs, the right-wing smear campaign that has already begun against the Green New Deal will make it difficult to win over the hearts and minds of the American public. But that is unlikely to stop those pushing for action to continue banging the drum for a Green New Deal. With momentum clearly behind them, the challenge now is to turn the lofty ideas proposed into concrete policies that can be enacted the next time the Democrat enters the White House.
Okay, she said the momentum clearly behind them. If that was the case, that would be something that Joe Biden would be talking a lot about. Now, this is going to be a different view. That one you can tell was kind of in favor of the Green New Deal. This one is not.
We face an existential threat. Life as we know it is on the line. We have 12 short years to change everything, or it's game over. This is the terrifying scenario that's used by many leading politicians to justify a Green New Deal, an unprecedented increase in government power focused on the energy industry. The core idea of a Green New Deal is that government should rapidly prohibit the use of fossil fuel energy and impose 100% renewable energy, mostly solar and wind. This may sound appealing, but consider what it would entail. Today, 80% of the energy Americans use to heat their homes, farm their land, run their factories, and drive their cars comes from fossil fuels, coal, oil, and natural gas. Only 3.4% comes from solar and wind, despite decades of government subsidies and mandates to encourage their use. The reason we don't use much sunlight and wind as energy is that they are unreliable fuels that only work when the sun shines and the wind blows. That's why no town, city, or country has ever come close to 100% or even 50% solar and wind. And yet, Green New Deal proponents say they can do the impossible, if only we give the government control of the energy industry and control of major users of energy, such as the transportation industry, manufacturing, and agriculture. All of this is justified by the need to do something about the existential threat of rising CO2 levels. We're told on a daily basis that prestigious organizations like the United Nations have predicted mass destruction and death if we don't get off fossil fuels. What we're not told is that such predictions have a decades-long track record of getting it wrong. And by wrong, I mean completely missing the dartboard wrong. For example, in 1989, the Associated Press reported the United Nations prediction that entire nations could be wiped off the face of the earth by rising sea levels if the global warming trend is not reversed by the year 2000. We're now 2 decades past 2000. We're not missing any nations, and human beings are living longer, healthier, and wealthier lives than ever before. But aren't things bound to get worse? Haven't scientists established that CO2 is a greenhouse gas with a warming influence on the planet? Yes, but that's only a small part of the big picture. Although CO2 causes some warming, it's much less significant than we've been told. Since we started using significant amounts of fossil fuels in the middle of the 19th century, we've increased the percentage of CO2 in the atmosphere from 0.03% to 0.04%, which correlates with an average temperature increase of about 2 degrees Fahrenheit. It also correlates with significant global greening because CO2 is plant food. All of this is far from unprecedented territory for our planet, which has existed with at least 10 times today's CO2 levels and a 25-degree warmer average temperature. What is truly unprecedented, though, is how safe we are from climate. The International Disaster Database, a nonpartisan organization that tracks deaths from climate-related causes, such as extreme heat, floods, storms, and drought, shows that such deaths have been plummeting as CO2 emissions have been rising. How is this possible? Because of the fossil fuel energy that emitted the CO2, which has empowered us to climate-proof our environment with heating, air conditioning, sturdy buildings, mass irrigation, and weather warning systems. Fossil fuel energy has not taken a naturally safe climate and made it unnaturally dangerous. It's taken our naturally dangerous climate and made it unnaturally safe. Fossil fuels are not an existential threat. They are an existential resource because they increase something much more important than the level of CO2 in the atmosphere, the level of human empowerment. Increased life expectancy, income, health, leisure time, and education are all tightly linked to increased access to fossil fuels. Does this mean that we shouldn't look for lower carbon energy alternatives? Of course not. But the alternatives should lead us toward more abundant, more reliable power, not less. The most promising form of alternative energy is not unreliable solar and wind, but reliable carbon-free nuclear energy. Sweden gets 40% of its electricity from nuclear, France over 70%. While nuclear energy is smeared as unsafe, it has actually been demonstrated by study after study to be the safest form of energy ever created. And yet, Green New Deal proponents who say that we have 12 years to save the planet from rising CO2 levels vigorously oppose nuclear, in addition to all fossil fuel use. By opposing every affordable, abundant, reliable form of energy, the Green New Deal won't protect us from an existential threat. It is an existential threat. I'm Alex Epstein, author of The Moral Case for Fossil Fuels for Prager University.
Okay, so you got two kind of differing views there, yes? pretty different. One of the things that was mentioned here, well, let me just kind of cap this. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she is a freshman House member of the House of Representatives. So she's a former bartender, and she has a degree from Boston University in economics, okay? Or Boston College, I should say, okay? These ideas, I mean, her Green New Deal, guys, I mean, it's kind of way out there thinking, like, in 12 years, it's over, it's too late, okay? And in 10 years to go from using 80% of our energy from fossil fuels to renewable energy is impossible, okay? The technology is just not there, okay? If any of you guys have driven to western Kansas in the last year or so, or a couple of years, you've seen all the wind farms, right? Okay. Did you guys know that a lot of that energy goes to California? It's not used here in Kansas. Most of that is sent out of state, the wind farms that we have. And I was talking to a couple guys that work in energy, and if you own some of that land in western Kansas, they have the huge the electric grid that sends the wind, okay, the wind energy to California. And if you own the land where they put the power poles, you know, what do you call those things? I guess it's the grid, but you know, the big, where the wires run, right? They pay you for, you know, putting those on your land. And if you have a wind turbine, they pay you for putting that on your land as well. So that's kind of been good for some landowners from here to California. All right. But yeah, I was really shocked that almost like 80% of it goes to California, of the wind power from Kansas. Okay. The thing about wind power that's different than gas is you can't store it. You got to use it. Okay. So like with gas, we have tanks, right? You have gas tanks. Okay. And with natural gas, which is a gas that's, you know, it's not like liquid. Okay. You can also store natural gas. Okay. But wind power, you can't store. It's got to be used immediately. Okay. Which creates a problem. Because you can't store that energy, you can't use it for other things like automobiles. I mean, how are you gonna? I mean, we have electric cars, right? But you're gonna have to set up a system where your electric cars are plugged into some type of electricity that comes from wind or solar. Okay, just the logistics of this make it very difficult. Okay, so this is kind of way out there, pie in the sky thinking that you would have to tear down every building in America or home in America and rebuild it to make it energy efficient. Okay. I mean, it starts to get crazy. And that's where you see this price tag of over $90 trillion. Yesterday, when I did Medicare for All, I said $36 trillion over 10 years. Okay. And this would be $90 trillion over 10 years. Okay. So, and believe me, AOC, she supports Medicare for All as well. So now we're putting a price tag of some of these things over $120 trillion, which is unfathomable. I mean, our budget today, budget this year for the United States is going to be about $5 trillion. Okay, so you can throw these ideas out there, but if you have no way to pay for them, or the technology doesn't exist. Okay, one thing that was mentioned, and this was something that I used to have on this form, was carbon. They call it cap and trade. So one way to control energy to try and help the environment in the views of some is cap and trade. So basically the government would cap how much energy. You guys have you heard of your carbon footprint? You heard of that? Okay, so how much do you drive, right? What kind of vehicle do you drive? What do you set your thermostat at home? Okay, did anybody turn on the heat in their house the last couple of days because it was a little bit cooler at night? Anybody turn on the heat? We did. Because I like my house like it's 75 degrees. In the summertime, I want it at 75. In the wintertime, I want it at 75. Where do you guys keep your thermostat? Huh? What temperature? You guys pay attention to what your temperature is in your house? 75? Is your house cold in the summer? So you keep the thermostat low, which uses a lot of carbon. Okay? It uses a lot of energy to do that. Yes? I mean, in the summer, my house isn't very, I don't know, it doesn't stay cool, you know? So we have that, when it's 100 degrees outside, it's like running all the time. You know what I mean? So what the government would do is cap how much energy you could use in a year. And if you went beyond that, you would have to pay a tax. Okay, same thing with businesses. Okay, so like Bishop Carroll High School would be given a limit of how much energy it could use in a year. And then if we started going by that, we would have to pay taxes. And we could also trade with somebody that's not using as much. And we could pay them for some of their energy use. And you would do this all across the country, okay? And then we could limit the total amount of energy that the country uses. So the government would control how much energy you use. Follow me on that? Okay, so you can kind of see, guys, when we talk about political ideology here, yesterday when I talked about Medicare for All, where the government would control all of healthcare, what you're seeing here is a differing view where government can do good in your life if you just let them, okay, and pay for it. Or I can do this on my own, okay, and I don't need the government's help for my subsistence. I am a free human being, okay, and if I want to drive a truck with a V8 in it, which uses a lot of gasoline, I can do that, okay, because when I hit the gas, I want my car to go, and my car does go, my truck goes. It's got a Hemi in it, and I like it. That's what I want. I'm willing to pay for it. If I get 15 miles a gallon, I'm paying more in gas than somebody that's driving a car that goes 40 miles per gallon. Okay? That's up to me. Do we want the government to control us like this? That's where you're going to come down, guys. You're going to come down on one side of that, on a lot of these issues. It's really a big difference between the two parties. Okay? So, on the Green New Deal, do you think that we should make every effort possible to convert from fossil fuels, which is how you all got to school today? Okay, unless you rode your bike. Everybody ride their bike to school today? Then you needed gasoline. Okay? Any of you guys have an electric car? Okay. So, Green New Deal, you decide. Okay? Taxes. I'll show you what people pay today. Okay? Now, we've talked a little bit about taxes recently, okay? But right here is a single person, okay? This would be, I would assume most of you guys, $0 to $9,700. Maybe some of you made more than 10 grand in the last year. I don't know. I would assume you didn't have time to do that, okay? So this is a 10% tax rate. Now, are you guys getting a lot of that money back? It's being taxed, but you're going to get a lot of refund. Remember, well, if you were watching yesterday, 48% of Americans pay 0 federal income tax. This is federal income tax. This is not state income tax. This is federal. Okay? You're going to get a lot of this back. Okay? So if you're somebody, remember I said the average American makes about $50,000. Okay? So if you are the average American, you're paying 22% of your income. That's just for federal income tax. Okay, there are other taxes as well. Okay, and then as you make more money, the tax percentage goes up. Okay, guys, this is called progressive. So progressive income tax. The more you make, the greater percentage you pay. So the rich, super rich, okay, pay 37%. So if you make $1 million, $370,000 goes to the government. You get to keep the rest. Okay. Now, in our country, because the progressive tax rate, okay, I don't know if I can zoom in on that. Okay. This is the percentage of all the money that comes into government, all the revenue and taxes. This shows the share of taxes the richest pay. Okay, so the wealthy in our country, because they pay 37%, and the 48% of Americans that don't pay any, okay? So the rich pay 45% of all the taxes. Now, the rich is a smaller group of people. You understand? So the top 5% pay a large amount of all the taxes that come in. Bottom 48, zero. Okay, so everybody else in between makes up the difference. All right, what kind of taxes do we have in this country? We just talked about federal income tax, right? The Fed income. Okay, we live in state in Kansas, right? So in Kansas, do we have a state income tax? You have to pay taxes in the state of Kansas? Do you know? Yeah, that comes out of your check. Okay? So you have state income tax. Now, there are a couple states that don't have that. Do you know what they are? 2 states. Maybe 3. But the 2 biggest ones are Texas and Florida. You don't pay any state income tax. Okay? In Kansas, we're in the top 10 of highest tax state taxes. Okay? The other big ones are California and New York. Really high state income taxes. All right? Kansas is a high tax state. What other kind of taxes do you pay? Pay sales taxes. Jackson, wake up. Pay sales taxes. Kansas, Wichita, we have pretty high sales tax. Isn't it like 7%? Yes? Okay. You guys know what excise taxes are? Sin. They're sin taxes. Things the government wants to discourage you from buying. This is called social engineering. So they tax something they don't want you to buy. Like what? Alcohol, tobacco. Okay? Now, this is the thing about control. When you give government control to say, okay, we don't want you to buy alcohol or tobacco because those are harmful to you. Okay? Now, is a glass of wine a day harmful to you? No, actually, it has medicinal benefits, yes? If you look at heart disease rates in places like France or in Spain compared to the United States, because they drink wine, okay? And, I mean, there's a lot of Americans who drink wine, but what we eat, our fatty foods and all that, gives us a high rate of heart disease, yes? Which might be one of the reasons why so many Americans are dying from COVID, is the fact that we are unhealthy and we have comorbidities, right? We have a lot of these, we have a lot of high diabetes rates in this country, we have high heart disease rates in this country, which means if you get COVID, it's especially dangerous for you. If you don't have comorbidities, you have 100-year-old people that have survived COVID because they're healthy 100-year-olds. Does that make sense? Okay, so sin tax. Now, if the government takes over healthcare, stay with me here. I talked about this yesterday. The government's paying, they're the single payer of healthcare. And they say, look, we need a healthier population because too many people have comorbidities and they're dying, and that costs a lot of money to put them in the hospital. If we had a healthier population, we wouldn't have as many people going to the hospital or going to the doctor and getting sick. So the government says, we're going to control what you eat so that you are healthier. And that'll cost everybody less money when it comes to healthcare. Is this the role of government that you want? Are you guys following me on this? Does this make sense? Okay. So what other types of taxes? Have you ever heard of capital gains? You ever watch one of those house flipping shows? somebody buys a house for like $50,000, kind of run down. They put like $20,000 into it, fix it up, right? They bought it for 50, invested 20. There's $70,000 into this. They turn around and sell it for $100,000. You just made a $30,000 profit. Yes? Okay, people do that all the time. Now, as an individual, if you live in that house for 5 years, you do not have to pay capital gains houses. But if you're flipping houses as a business, this is what you do for a living or as a side job, okay? Capital gains tax is 27%. So you made $30,000, okay? But close to 30% of that's going to go to the government. Same thing in the stock market, okay? So if you invest $100 in the stock market, okay, and you make $100, you're going to pay 27% of that, $27 in taxes. You get to keep 63. Okay, that's a capital gains tax. Okay, now some people think if you lower that, then more people are more likely to invest. More people are going to be more enterprising. Follow me on that? If you raise that, then people aren't going to, why risk putting my money in the market when I have to pay 37% of what I gain? Why would I invest in something? Okay, it's kind of self-defeating. I know we have more taxes. Well, you got Social Security, right? And you got Medicare, right? Oh, here's one. Ever heard of the estate tax? Okay, some people don't like this. They call it the death tax. Okay. Okay, so your whole life you're taxed. Money you make is taxed. And then when you die, they're going to tax you again. Now, the number here is if your estate is, I believe the number is $1.6 million. Okay. Then you get hit with a pretty hefty estate tax when you die. Now you're dead. Who's going to pay the tax? The people you leave your estate to. Okay, guys, this is why it's really important to pay attention when grandma or grandpa or mom and dad start getting close to end of life, is to look at your estate planning. Okay, there are lawyers that do this. Okay, where you go. Now listen, if you own a farm in Kansas, the land itself, depending on how big it is, may be worth that. Now you put the house on top of it, the farm equipment and everything else on top of that, you're going to run past 1.6 million really fast. Okay, so this is why a lot of family farms really struggle with the estate tax. Okay, but if your parents say they own a nice house and they own some property somewhere else, and then they have some stocks and bonds that they saved up over time, and they pass away and they have an estate of over 1.6 million, you got a problem. You're going to lose that. Okay, so you have to plan for this. You got to work around it. Okay, so one thing you can do is put things into a trust. Okay, and then the trust is like a living organism, and the trust pays taxes on the estate. It's just like you never died, your estate never died, and it just continues to pay taxes on what's in it. Okay, and so like when my wife's mom and dad passed away, her dad was an engineer for 40 years with General Electric. She was a teacher. They lived humbly. They saved a lot of money. They had a pretty big estate. And so her dad, because he was really smart, had the trust drawn up even before, before he got sick. You know what I mean? And so they kind of took care of a lot of that. Okay, this is something you got to be really pay attention to if your family has a little bit of, quite a few assets. Okay, so now the average American, okay, we saw 22%, right, for a single person on the federal income tax. So in Kansas, your state income tax, you're gonna add 6% here. Okay, you're at 28%. Okay. Now you add your Social Security, that's 6.2%. Okay, you're now at 34.2. Okay. Then you throw in these sales taxes, any other type of thing here. You got Medicare, we're gonna add another 2% here. Okay, we're at 36.2. So, and that doesn't include sales tax. Okay, so the average American is paying around 36% plus. Really, the number's around 40% when you throw in everything else. If all your income goes into taxes. Okay, now when you look at France and you look at some of these other countries that have nationalized healthcare systems, Medicare for all, they have, the government does more for people. Okay, these rates are much higher than in the United States. Okay, this is not high compared to France, Belgium, Britain. Okay, theirs are much higher. In fact, Australia is the most highly taxed country in the world. You know what is one of the lowest? Is Mexico. Okay, in the United States, relative to these other European democratic socialist countries, our taxes are relatively low. Now, 40% bothers some people. That's like, so I work 5 months of the year so I can pay my taxes, and the other 7 months of the year for myself. That's basically what it comes down to. Okay, so obviously this money goes to pay for the military. It goes to pay for things like education and welfare. It goes to pay for roads and bridges and all the things that government does. Okay, if you want government to do more, this has got to go up. Okay, so knowing what you know, what I kind of told you about where we are as what we pay in taxes, what the normal person pays in taxes, do you think we should raise taxes or reduce taxes or leave them about where they're at? So with this, if you want to cut taxes, you say 40% for the average American. When it's all said and done, is too much. Then say yes. If you think we're good where we're at, you can say no. If you know, or you're worried about them going up, you can say yes. You think we need more tax or less tax? Does that make sense? Okay. So you guys can answer that, and then I'm going to try to squeeze 15 in here. Okay. Against hate crime legislation. Now, with this, guys, a crime, let me give you okay, let's say it's a normal year, and we're playing Northwest this weekend, right? Now, Northwest likes to come over, some of their students, and put like a T-shirt on Jesus or Mary and that sort of thing, right? I think last year they actually spray painted, right? If I recall, there might have been some spray paint. Okay. All right. Let's say, let me change it up a little. We're playing Northwest. They come over and they spray paint on the side of the AC. Bishop Carroll stinks. What's the crime? Vandalism, destruction of property, maybe, trespassing, something like that. Okay. Now let me change what it says. It says Catholics suck. What's the crime? Vandalism, trespassing, destruction of property. But since it's an attack on a religion, we could possibly make it a federal civil rights violation and a hate crime, which would carry a lot stiffer penalty for the perpetrator. Okay, let me make this a little different. Let's say you draw a swastika on a Jewish synagogue, or cut off a pig's head and lay it at the front door of the mosque. they don't like pork, right? They don't touch pork or eat pork, okay? It's dirty to them, okay? That's hateful, yes? Okay? Now, these laws stem out of a case out of Wyoming about 25 years ago, maybe 20. No, it's probably 25. It was a young man that lived there in Wyoming. His name was Matthew Shepard, okay? And Matthew Shepard was gay in Wyoming. This is 25 years ago, guys, okay? So things have changed a lot in the last 25 years. But this young man went into a bar in Wyoming, and there were a couple of guys there that figured out he was gay, and they decided to kind of trick him into getting into their truck, and apparently they didn't like gay people. And so they took him out to a remote area and beat him to death and left him for dead. So the news media did its thing, and really, this was massive amounts of coverage on this. And these two guys were convicted of murder. There were no hate crimes on the book, okay? So they were convicted of second-degree murder. And then people said, well, we need laws that increase the penalty for crimes that were committed out of hate of another person's religion, their race, their gender, their sexual orientation, okay? And so some states passed these laws, okay? And the federal government passed hate crime laws, all right? Now, the Matthew Shepard case, several years after this was over, a journalist. Now, this guy has some credibility because he was a gay journalist, okay? He was himself homosexual. He looked into this case. And this guy, Matthew Shepard, the gay guy that got killed, this journalist found out that this was really over a drug deal gone bad. Matthew Shepard was dealing drugs, meth to be specific. And this murder was done over drugs, not because Matthew Shepard was gay. Okay, so that whole narrative that went on for years about the only reason why he was killed was because he was gay was a lie. Okay, and that happens, guys, a lot. The news gets it wrong. Now, do these laws protect people from crimes? Knowing that if you want to do harm to somebody because of their race, their ethnicity, their gender, their sexual orientation, their religion, does it prevent you from carrying out a crime? Okay. Now, the charges for murder, are pretty stiff anyways. Okay. Can you make them stiffer with this? Absolutely. I just heard this, that, okay, you guys know what a MAGA hat is, right? So there was, at the Democratic National Convention a couple of weeks ago, there was these Republicans that were out protesting outside, not really, well, they were protesting, they were holding up Trump signs, and these two college girls, white college girls, basically assaulted the father, and then there was a 7-year-old boy there, okay? And one of these college girls shoved the 7-year-old boy as he was trying to get back the MAGA hat that the girls took. They have been charged with a hate crime. Nobody was injured. You understand? Like seriously injured or anything like that. But they're being charged with a hate crime, which could be a federal, they could do years in prison for that. Okay? Is this, which normally might be a case where, okay, you have assault, okay, and you might do, a weekend in jail and maybe probation, some community service. Okay, these girls are facing real jail time. Okay, now I deplore what they did to the 7-year-old kid and his grandfather or his father, whoever it was. And it was nasty, and they should pay a price. But is it a hate crime? The government's got to get in people's mind. So say a white guy and a black guy get in a fight, and in the heat of the battle, the white guy uses the N-word. Well, that must be a hate crime. But what the cops need to know is that the black dude said something nasty about the white dude's mother. And that's why they were fighting, not because he was black. Now, in the heat of the moment, he didn't use the N-word. Does this make it a hate crime, become a federal civil rights case? How do you do that? How do you differentiate? Okay? And so this kind of opens up a little bit of a Pandora's box, like, when do you call a hate crime, when you don't? Obviously, some hate crimes are pretty obvious. Okay, but others are little, I mean, come on. So you got to kind of be careful with these. And hopefully you have enough information there to decide. And tomorrow we'll pick up, and we're going to do 3 or 4 tomorrow. Okay? I hope you guys have a good day.